issues that face us. Okay, so you've heard from the people at the front. Thank you for being so patient. It's a very warm evening, I'm conscious of that, and everyone's doing very well. We have 2 roving microphones, I'm told, and obviously we'll try and get as many people as possible. Can I just show of hands an indication of how many people want to make a contribution, want to speak? Generally people warm up. So I have 2 right in the middle there, if the microphone's going to hit there, and I have 1 hand at the back. So we'll take 3 to start with, and we'll go from there.
Hello, my name's Antony, and I live in Great Shore, just outside of Cambridge. I have to say it's been really interesting listening to all of you this evening, and thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. It comes over from you, I don't know if I'm misinterpreting it, but it comes over from you that you are accepting that Brexit is going to happen. It doesn't. It doesn't, unless the Prime Minister pushes the button for Article 50. We can remain in the European Union. I am a very proud citizen of the European Union. I'm a proud member of the United Kingdom as well, and I wish that to remain so. Please write to your politicians, encourage them to vote against Brexit. I really encourage you to do so. Thank you very much.
So 2 people close, so let's take those 2 as well.
Hello, my name is Annie Cooper. I work here in the David Attenborough building, a conservation cluster here in Cambridge for Fauna and Flora International. I'm not in this whole debate and discussion, which I've been following as much as I can. I've not had anybody really address conservation, either in terms of perhaps the more general issues that apply to a lot of sectors, and we have a lot of international staff and international issues, but also in terms of the specific policies that are incredibly important to conservation in the EU and the UK around the EU habitats and the EU birds directives, which of course have set up, as some people in this room may know, the Natura 2000 network of conservation areas. I'd be really interested to hear anyone in the panel who can talk specifically about the impacts for conservation of a Brexit, and specifically about what conservation organisations could be doing to think about that.
Thank you. And there was someone very close to you. Yes.
My name is Simon Shaffer, I teach in the university. I'd like to pick up something Claire said. She boasted about the fact that this country is not corrupt. That's clearly false. One of the most obvious lessons. I take Simon's point that lots of people are trying to own the result of the referendum, so I'll do that. One of the things I learned from the referendum is that public debate in this country is completely corrupt. You can buy the news in this country, and you can buy the news, especially, as it turns out, if you're not a citizen of Europe. So, what I want to ask is, given that we were all, and surely correctly, at one on the immense importance for our nation and for the rest of Europe of the free mobility of labour, how can we collectively make sure that that issue is invulnerable to the obscene corruption which affected the debate about that issue between January and July of this year? Under the sign immigration, that issue was completely traduced. Now clearly that matters an enormous amount in this city, but it matters enormously to the rest of Europe too. We must not run away with the idea that this is an entirely centripetal question. This is a question about how it affects us here in Finland. But the great obstacle, as it seems to me, to producing the sort of debate that is so welcome this evening and that Simon rightly wants us to have, is the parasites who make that debate systematically impossible. In order, as Simon has said, to decide what kind of country we want, they must be silenced. And I would like advice
We'll deal with those 3 points first. I'm trying to chair this rather than contribute, but I suspect some of them are going to come back to politics. So, the first one, I think I will just respond to the first statement, because it comes very directly to the politicians. And I very much agree with you that, in my view, it was a straw poll. Part of the argument, of course, was that the argument was to take back control. And that control, in my view, should come back to the UK Parliament. Now, it's not entirely clear at the moment, there's an argument going on as to whether the Parliament will be given an opportunity to vote. But most of the MPs who have returned to Parliament in the last election actually stood on a platform where they would be votes to remain. That's not difficult for me. I should vote. I do appreciate that for MPs in other parts of the country who had a very different voting constituencies, it is difficult for them. So I'm not unsympathetic to their difficulties, but I say on this occasion, unusually I find life is quite simple for me. But I'd like to move to the environmental question, and an apology really, because I think the environmental issues are tremendously significant. It's always hard putting the panel together, because there were so many issues we could have had introductory comments on. You are absolutely right on that. So I'm just going to ask Simon said a little bit about the points you made.
Speaking as a political scientist who's spent 20 years working on Euroscepticism, I'm happy to talk about environmental conservation. I think the key thing that I would be thinking about is the inertia of political systems, and actually kind of tangentially touches on the other 2 contributions that have been made, which is that, particularly at the moment, we are moving towards Brexit, whatever Brexit may mean. Oh, I know what it means. Brexit means Brexit. There is an awful lot on the table, and anything that can be got off the table, relatively unproblematically, will be got off the table. One of those things might well be conservation, and the kind of work that you talked about environmental protection, about research on environmental questions more broadly, that there is a broad consensus, one would imagine, that this is a good thing in political terms, and that if the system looks like it works, that then there will be an effort to try and move it onto a list of, well, let's try and keep that set of arrangements in operation, but rather than trying to go through more transition arrangements to some new situation, that as much as possible you will find, particularly in areas, dare I say, which aren't at the top of the political agenda, like this, that there will be a strong incentive to try and find ways of just carrying on through. Now, that's not a very happy, constructive kind of answer, but actually, in a time where you have so much going on, actually trying to make sure that you remember to get somebody to put you on a list of the things we keep as they are might well be the most constructive thing that's worth doing, and that at some point later you think about how it changes and what needs to be adapted to. And I think that that's the second point, and again it comes back to the questions or comments that have already been made. I think the last 6 weeks have demonstrated the almost complete lack of constructive plans for this situation. It's not even that there aren't half-baked ideas out there. There are barely any quarter-baked ideas out there on any side. Now, in that context, having an idea that might only be an eighth baked might not be very good, but it might well get quite a long way. Just to make a quick comment on the free movement issue, nobody has a good answer about how to do things. It's clear that there's an issue, it's clear that there are divisions of opinion, but nobody knows how to do it. I was having tea with a colleague here at the university earlier on today, just telling me about a reverse Greenland option. She didn't know what it was, I didn't know what it was. She was asking if I knew, none of us knew. there are lots of ideas and options out there, and probably the most useful thing you can do, we can do, is to come up with ideas and options. Not simply, we like this, we want this to happen, but saying how you do the thing you want. Because if you don't think about the how, then the object is going to be as far away and as frustrating as it is right now.
Thank you. Claire's going to try and respond to the corruption of the public debate, which I have a lot of sympathy, I have to say.
Simon, I think it was Simon, I challenge you to a duel outside actually, but I used to hear quite a good fencer, so that sounded like a bit of a soundbite that wins applause. And in my view, being frank, is the UK corrupt? No, compared with many other places, we all know the UK is not terribly corrupt. Insert terribly, just to be safe. Are people weak and fallible? Yes, very often they are. There was a lot of exaggeration. There were many people coming to believe their own sales pitches, and competitive people taking sides to win. But I don't think the UK is corrupt, so I stand by what I said. We will discuss it later afterwards, or if anybody else wants to join in that one, it was a bit of a popular cheer.
Indeed, I think the debate is the very trivial nature of 350 million the NHS was. And I think that does corrupt the public debate. But sorry, I'm abusing my position as chair. Now, some I saw right at the back on the first round, they still have their hand up. Yes, at the very corner. And then I can see John in the front. So if we can go there, and someone can be ready here.
I got an email from Cambridge City Council having an option for staying apart of the EU and being semi-independent. I don't know whether it was a spoof or whether it was a serious proposition, so I just wanted to ask about that. Whether Cambridge City had an option or an idea whether this is real or a fantasy.
Clarity, we can come back to in a moment.
Thank you very much. My name is John Hipkin, and I'm a city councillor and a county councillor. And it's because I'm a county councillor that I want to slightly widen the discussion of the issues before us this evening. Can I start with Simon Usherwood's question? What sort of society do we want to be? One of the emerging consensus appears to be that we ought to be more equal. Both Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May have made great play of the fact that this country is among the most unequal of any country in the world. I think the tone this evening has been somewhat Cambridge-centred. Daniel's introduction used the words, this is about protecting Cambridge's future. Can I point out to you that as many people in Finland voted to leave as people in Cambridge voted to stay? And to the question that Claire Rankin asks, why are people angry? Many of them are angry because they're poor, because they get so little of the cake. Finland is among the poorest regions in Europe, and it's 20 miles from our border. The educational standards in Finland are among the lowest in the country. So my question is this: how serious are we about closing the inequality gap? And what contribution to the closing of that gap is this city prepared to make? We'll have our opportunity if the city and other local authorities decide to take the government's devolution offer, which would give us huge sums with which to deal with many of the problems facing the whole of the county. And that is the point at which I shall be looking very keenly to see how fair Cambridge is in its thinking about the disposition of the money throughout the county.
Hi, I'm Pete Dopping. I'm leader of South Cambridge District Council. Yeah. Okay, so I'm marketing direction for Ability. So earlier this week, we had a guided tour of a number of science parks, which are in South Cambridge, and in places like Kingston and Bayborough, Great Abingdon. And we were taking the opportunity to look at the terrific science that's taking place there, and this investment coming in from all across the world to try and drive that. But we're very clear in South Cambridge that those things are geographically based in our villages, but it's the Cambridge brand that drives that sort of world interest and excitement. And from my own experience as a civil servant in the past, I know that Whitehall listens to Cambridge as a brand. And I think that it's very important that the messages that go to Whitehall from this city and from us around it are sort of coherent and direct. Because I do believe that there is the opportunity to influence government just because of the sheer scale and power of the Cambridgeshire economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, just quickly on that point of information at the beginning, I think that there was some stuff that went around the Twitter sphere about maybe Cambridge being able to go sort of unilaterally on its own. I don't think there's ever anything that was seriously raised by a public body. I think it was a fantasy that many of us perhaps would have liked to entertain, but I don't think many think it's really a go. So that's where I think that was. John, you raised some very, very important points there. I would love to respond, but I'm chairing, so I'm going to pass over to Mike to do that one, and then we'll have Chris responding on the Cambridge brand.
Thank you, Daniel. I think. I think the point that very large numbers of people who voted in the referendum did vote, whether they should debate before it was sufficient for the purpose is a point to be made, did vote to leave. And at least for a substantial proportion of those, I guess, it was an expression of a dissatisfaction, a fundamental dissatisfaction with the way things are now. And some of it is inequality, some of it is like an access to jobs or to education facilities and the like. And I think it is right that Cambridge recognises that it is unusual as a city, not in the reflection of its how it voted, but in its characteristics anyway. And that's been a dilemma for Cambridgeshire for a long time. I well remember going into Fenland villages, Christchurch and other such small villages in the Fens, and it is a very different world to that which is inhabited in Cambridge. It doesn't have the same vistas open to it. It does physically, the sky is enormous, but it doesn't look outwards in that sense. And there is on occasion a kind of a slight sense of things go on elsewhere, they don't come to us. And so I think that is, in terms of the body politic, a fundamental issue. And in my career I've seen that in rural areas, I've seen it in highly urban, central London. You go to central London, you've got on one hand within half a mile of each other, you've got Belgravia and Harrow Road. Complete opposite ends of the extreme in terms of poverty, in terms of life chances, in terms of life entitlement. So I think the point about inequality is fundamentally important and right. I suppose the challenge for Cambridge is you're not addressing the equality by weakening Cambridge. So it's how that a stronger Cambridge can somehow contribute to the success in that. It's not answered by weakening Cambridge.
Thank you. And on the third point.
Thank you. But I just actually want to first of all comment on the regional issues. The university is very involved in regional issues. Since January we've had a Pro-Vice-Chancellor specifically looking at regional issues. We're very engaged in discussions around different devolution models. And we're also very engaged on, for example, issues around, for example, agriculture in the region. And we're also got to be mindful that a lot of people who work in the university are not very highly paid, and that the issues that they face in finding housing, with transport and everything else. So we take a very broad agreement. Going back to the other issue about the Cambridge brand, Cambridge University has a brand that is recognised globally, and it's something that we protect carefully, because otherwise, if it becomes damaged and tarnished, then it becomes not useful to us. But I think, obviously, looking broader than that, the city has a brand as well, with everything that goes on around it, and the university is part of that. In my limited time involved in senior management of the university, I have been impressed by the seriousness with which we can engage discussions with politicians. So we do go down, I go down, others go down for breakfast meetings in Parliament. We do engage with other national bodies and international bodies like the Russell Group of the universities. And it's very clear that we are recognised as a brand. I think we have spectacular, really good leadership in the university with our Vice-Chancellor, who spoke passionately about his commitment to remain. And having spent the morning with him and after, I can tell you, he, in fact all of us were extremely upset that day. And so we shouldn't doubt the commitment that the university has on these issues. But yes, Cambridge does have an influence, and we intend to use every opportunity to use it going forward.
Thank you very much. Now we have a cluster just there, so one patient person, then we'll go to the two people in the row.
Hi, my name is Lindy McMahon, and I work as a teaching assistant at the Grove Primary School in Cambridge. At the Grove Primary School, we have a third of our children are the children of immigrants to this country, none of their parents would reach for even the two of them together, let alone one, £35,000, which has been bandied around as the figure that people must earn before they have entitlement to stay. I'm very concerned for the poor immigrants to this country. Not only do I work at a school which is in the grip of this level of poverty, I am really concerned that there is a feeling that economic migration is not a good enough reason for people to come to this country. My father-in-law came to this country as an economic migrant. He came from Ireland in the 1960s. He came with virtually nothing and has, with the opportunities that have been afforded to him in this country, managed to make a business which turns over several £1 million a year. He has been important in the place where he lives for providing work for hundreds, if not thousands, of people, many of whom are also economic migrants, mostly coming from Eastern Europe. I feel very strongly that we need to protect people who come here because they know that they can make a better life for themselves. I have a friend who came here and works from Poland, who came and works as au pair, and she cleans houses as well. Out of the money that she earns, which is a very small amount, not only does she pay her own way, look after her child, but she also sends a considerable amount of her wages back to her family in Poland, and thereby supports people back in the country which she came from and improves their lot there. So economic migration is really important, and we need to protect the rights of people to come here to do their best, not just for themselves and for the future, but for the countries that they come from.
The stripy t-shirt top. Sorry, can you pass the microphone back? We will come back to you in a minute. Can you pass the microphone back? Sorry, it's quite difficult when there's so many people wishing to speak. We'll come to you next.
Hello, I'm Andrew Cambrexit. I'm a software developer living in Cambridge. Going back to what Simon
was said about what does Brexit mean, how do we move the debate from working out or trying to divine what exactly all the people who voted for Brexit wanted, and onto the train of what does the country as a whole want? Because some of those people who voted for Brexit were very excited about immigration, but not all of them, and therefore it seems likely that over the whole population there might still be a majority for freedom of movement and continued membership of the single market. And if we move into that train, we can have a better kind of Brexit. Does that work, and how do we do it?
Thank you. The chat next to you.
Hi, I was just mention about, I feel that another issue that has been mentioned today is about racism. So I feel that, it wasn't that long ago that there was a horrible incident in Huntingdon, not far from Cambridge, that attacked Polish people, saying, calling Polish people vermin to leave the EU. That wasn't that long ago. And, I just sadly feel that the referendum result has also given a platform for racists, and this must be stopped.
Yes, protecting low-income migration, I absolutely agree. I think very good point. We have people in our caring professions as well as in all other professions and businesses around Cambridge. We need to keep these people coming in very definitely. Not to say that we should also welcome all people. I was somewhat flippant in my, I can't understand why people are unhappy. I know very well why people are unhappy. It is because of the lack of life chance that they have and the lack of income that they have. We've got to balance people who are already here from wherever, from local as I was, or from outside the country, and keep everybody going up that chain. We can do it, and the UK is a very good place to do that.
Thank you. And Simon, is there a better way?
Well, the obvious way to determine what people actually want is to go and ask them, but we tried that, and that's what we understand. There's a myth of rationality in all of this, that you obviously have reached, carefully considered, weighted opinions, balanced all the factors. You've made tables and you've got the tables and you've processed it all, and you've reached a decision. You've all done that, right? No, of course you haven't. I don't. You haven't. They haven't. But people have emotional engagements with political issues, very clearly. And that can't be quantified or abstracted into what the population is. It's clear that whatever happens, there will be a proportion, possibly a substantial proportion of people who will not be happy about what happens because it's not what they wanted or not what they think they want. Now, I think the way out of that in a representative system is that coalitions form, politicians articulate plans of action which will be more or less attractive to you. And actually, ultimately, what we will see working through is that there will be programs that are presented to you in the next general election, which might still conceivably be later this year, depending on how lucky Theresa May feels, depending on the Labour leadership election. It might not be until 2020, but again, this is such a big development, such a big change in British politics that it's something which will continue to play out over the long term. Well over 1, 2, 3 parliamentary cycles. Now, that's not a very satisfactory way of going about things, but it comes back to what we talked about before, that people need to start articulating views, articulating positions, working towards trying to lobby and convince those who are in positions of power that this is the right way to try and advance. Now, again, that happens in lots of different ways. It happens in meetings like this. It happens by talking to people you know, seeing if you can find ways to present joint positions. Now, there's never going to be something that makes everybody happy. We're in a majoritarian system. The question is, can we tolerate what the majority decide if we don't like what the majority decides? And it's a mark of perhaps where we are in this group of people that we might well not have had this Senate debate if the results had been the other way around. Now, that's a mark of how often, usually, the system works in favour of places like Cambridge. That it does actually promote liberal, cosmopolitan, progressive ideas in the broad scope of things. And when you have a reverse like this, or what feels like a reverse like this, it really hurts. And I think it highlights the fact that there is a substantial part of the UK, the majority of those who voted, who, I'm going to explain this on that, who don't feel that the system works for them. So I think we do need to appreciate that there are different views out there that can't easily be reconciled. But it's only going to be through dialogue, through listening to what each side has to say, and trying to find ways forward that we're going to find a way of advancing.
I'm going to take mine very quickly, and then I'm going to take the whole load. So, be ready to put your hands up.
Can I just pick up the point that Indy raised about the direction? I completely agree with it, and I hope from what I said about Admiral's echo the fact that Admiral's, for example, completely relies on this workforce, and many of which will not be highly paid, some are, but many are not. So I very much take the point that Indy's made. But I just want to make a couple of points. One is I saw, there was an article in the Financial Times, I think it was Wednesday this week, in which it said that if all 3.5 million people who are non-UK EU citizens who are currently in the country were to remain, and one went to some sort of visa process in order to enable that to happen, on current processing time, the article said, it would take 140 years. Now, I don't know how that's calculated, I can't quite get my head around that, but the fact that the Financial Times, I think, generally seems a credible newspaper. So that was interesting. The other point I'd make is that the trouble is going to be for Cambridge is that economic activity in every part of this country is fundamentally different. So we all, I just had some work done at home in Cambridge, and by and large the builders who did it were from Poland and Lithuania. There was no sense that they were crowding out others in Cambridge, because actually the economic activity in Cambridge is strong. But I suspect reason why a place like Finland voted reverse is there was a sense, legitimate or not, that it was crowded out. So I think part of the issue, I guess, for Cambridge is how do you make sure that the hot economy's voice is heard and not diluted in the average case. And I don't quite know how that works.
Right, and now forests and forests of hands, and 25 minutes left. So what I'm going to do... I understand your point, but lots of people who want to make points. So what I'm going to do is... it's absolutely right that we challenge racism wherever it is. I don't think it's going to be controversial here. So, and I would ask you just to respect the wishes of other people here. So we'll take the microphone, we'll start at the beginning here. If we can make the contributions quick, we can get everyone having their say. So if we can start there, we'll go back there, and we'll go over on the side.
Hi, just wanted to say that it's no good as a country relying on cheap labour from overseas, as Claire wants us to do, unlike as well. I would remain, like everyone in this room, we can't, in the long term, justify to the people living in the Bentley and the whole of the east of England who are so poor. And it's not just about money, it's about the fact that they have to wait until that morning before someone phones them up and tells them that they've got a job that day. So even if you're working on a low salary in Admiral's, overseas worker, you've got a contract, you've got a proper terms and conditions, you've got holiday pay, and you've got sick pay. Now, the people where I come from, you would give the right arm for that sort of condition. So it's not just a one-sided argument. We have to understand why 17 million votes were elected, and they're not all bigots, and they weren't all swung by press barons. Quite a few probably were.
I just wanted to bring up some points about the NHS. I am saddened by the fact that even though we were in the EU for so long and we one of the richer countries, that our expenditure on health services was very low in comparison to all the other countries. And so we've ended up in a position where disabled people and elderly people, their rights and rights against discrimination are not being upheld. And I'm rather amused that Mike is surprised or alarmed by the growth of elderly people arriving at Edinburgh's, given that you could have projected that for some years. But to remind you that they paid national insurance contributions for 40 or 50 years and should be entitled to medical treatments. I'm worried that Brexit will become an excuse for the failures of the NHS. For example, we've recently had the removal of bursaries for nurses, which is going to dramatically affect the workforce in the NHS. We have a third of the beds in Papworth Hospital used as private beds, and this has a huge effect on the availability of treatments in the NHS. But what I want to come to about the future is the increased risks of privatisation of the NHS. There was a lot of talk about TTIP in Europe and the threat of TTIP to the NHS. But what's actually happening now, according to The Guardian and various other papers, is that we're now having talks with the US about a bilateral trade agreement with the US, which will include ISDS, which undermines the sovereignty of governments to renationalise services, etc. If this agreement is signed, it will leave the NHS open to be bought up by US health companies and will increase NHS privatising, the risk of that dramatically.
Thank you very much. Can we come to some people at the beginning at the front here as well? Thank you. Yeah, we will go to the back next.
I just have a couple of connected points. One of the things I haven't heard addressed in all of the economic discussion of what it costs us to be a member of the European Union is that we have devolved a tremendous amount of the bureaucracy and government issues that we would now have to repatriate and pay for. A lot of the foreign affairs are conducted on a European-wide basis. We no longer have trade negotiators, and there's been complaints about the fact that we have to resource them, we have to bring them in from abroad. So there's a lot of government function that has not been discussed at any point about what are the benefits when what we're paying out that we, quote, don't get back in direct funds. We are getting services that are being done by the bureaucracy in Brussels that we complain about, that we will now have to do at Whitehall, and that hasn't been addressed.
Absolutely. Who's possible the microphones of this next is Colin, and then we'll go to the back in the interest of equity.
Speaking as a pensioner in Bristol, the statistic from the results of the referendum that most scared me in the long-term impact was that a majority of people in work voted to remain, and pensioners like me who expect these people to pay my pension in the future voted to leave. That strikes me as bringing yet another factor that's dividing this country dangerously going into the future, particularly if Brexit produces a serious economic downturn, as everybody seems to think it will.
Thank you. So the microphone's potentially to that. Very good. So the lady in the aisle there who's been waving to me for a long time. Yes, keep going. Yeah. Thank you.
A novelty, a question. We can't have, and Francis O'Grady recently said, we can't have working people pay the price of Brexit, whether that be people working in the university, in the hospital, or in the supermarkets in Cambridge. So I nominate Francis O'Grady to be one of the negotiators to help us get us out of this mess. Who would you have on the negotiating panel?
Very good question. Can you bring it forward? There was a lady raising the middle there, I saw. Yes, waving at me. Yeah.
If my accent doesn't betray my bias in this, then perhaps my question will. This November will be my 10th year in this country. I came over from Italy 10 years ago. I studied here, I work here now. It seems very clear to me that we don't know what people want to do with us. So that's fine, I'm not going to ask that because nobody knows. But does not anybody actually know whose decision it is what we do with us?
Good question. Yeah? Is the microphone going that direction? Where's the microphone got to? It's all getting there, yeah. Well, so you and then the man in check shirt behind you.
Hi, Brian Rogers. Claire suggested that we wanted some swift vision, but I think Simon indicated that the chances of anything happening in this vacuum policy is just not going to happen. The immense task of negotiating our way out of disentanglement with Europe, as everybody's been indicating, will take years. And right now, we've got 3 Brexiteers, Johnson, Fox, and David Davis. David Davis said 2 weeks before the referendum that we could negotiate car deals with Germany, wine deals with France, and such utter nonsense that gave a lie to his capacity to understand what the implications of negotiating in or out of the EU would be. And I just find that the idea that businesses are going to get a swift solution to this is just fantasy, quite frankly. So there's one thing that I would make a positive plea for, and it's to our chairman, Daniel. In October, Tom Brooke has a 10-minute bill coming up for a second reading, which looks to protect EU citizens with a right to remain. And if we can get that enshrined in law, I'd be delighted to answer the lady from Italy and our other immigrant friends who are colleagues of ours in Cambridge and elsewhere in the country.
Thank you, Daniel. Michael Bond, and I will own up to voting for Brexit. Yes, I am a pensioner, but I have spent all my life working. In 1976, I voted to remain in what was then the European Community. This time I voted out, because quite frankly, the way that the EU is going, it is actually heading in one way street to disaster, and nobody seems to be able to bring Brussels to heel. I'm disappointed in that, and if any of you have got a magic wand and can make that happen, then that could transform. Because I think Europe working together is one of the best things that can happen. Why wasn't any planning done? Well, that was because Mr. Osborne and Cameron told their civil servants not to do anything. And also, I would say that their increasing hysteria in the run-up to the vote probably made more people go to Brexit than the other way, because what they were saying was frankly unbelievable. Because if you took it at face value, Osborne was saying, I completely failed this Chancellor, and made big cost of it. And I don't think it was quite that bad. You were commenting about funding, etc. Well, frankly, funding for research has always been international. 50 years ago, I was funded by the United States Department of Agriculture. One of my colleagues was funded by the Gulbenkian Foundation. You went for the money wherever it was to support what you were looking to do and achieve. So that will not change. What will change is that the amount of money that goes to Brussels and then gets sent back as European Union funding will actually remain in this country, and it will be up to Daniel and his colleagues to make sure that the research budgets are adequately funded from what should be a larger pot.
Can I almost bring you to an end now? I'm keen to have some different voices, so it's good, but you come to an end so we can get some more at the back there.
Yeah, I think that we do have the skills to negotiate, and I think that the ability of Britain to negotiate good deals should not be underestimated.
Thank you. If we go to the two at the back, I can see right at the back by the pillar, waving, and then we'll work our way back around that side. And then we will come back to the beginning.
Councillor. In respect of one of the questions that was raised regarding racism, I just wanted to share that we made a resolution on the 19th of July at our full council meeting to write to central government with our concerns that this vote may have caused some to feel that this was a way to legitimise feelings that they may have that are racist. So my question to the chairman would be, would you be able to convey to Parliament the resolution that we made, which is that it absolutely will not be tolerated, and that we in Cambridge and in New Cambridgeshire are a people that believe that everyone should be respected and looked out for.
Thanks, yeah, so I'm actually 37 years old. I studied in both the UK and the States. I've worked in Norway and the UK, both as a researcher, but more recently I came back and set my own company up here. So I'm in the startup domain now, so I've benefited massively from mobility. But for people in my position, we're really quite dependent on opportunities to support research and early stage development. I've benefited also from European Space Agency funding, and one of the questions is whether or not the UK organisations can continue to get access to European Space Agency funding after the referendum results. But one of the points was raised earlier that we're still in the European Union and nothing will change, yet there was an article in the Independent on the 25th of July that has said the UK government is already suspending payments from the European Regional Development Fund. So my question would be, is there going to be any guarantees that we're going to be able to continue to access funding in this period that we don't really know what's going on? And if we do actually leave, is the government going to actually guarantee that we'll continue to be able to access a similar level of funding? And my advice would be that should be made public sooner than later, because just like business, researchers are also going to make decisions about whether or not they stay in the UK or maybe they look for opportunities elsewhere.
Thank you. And if we can go to the back on that side, we might someone right at that back pillar again, or work our way back down to the front.
Hi, I've actually got a couple of questions for the panel members. First is for Claire. I was just wondering, for Cambridge, how important is it to the Cambridge business community to remain part of the single market? The second question I have is for actually all panel members, and it's if you were to recommend one action that everyone in this room could take to try and secure the best possible outcome from the coming negotiations, what would it be?
Thank you. And if we can just come further forward, I can see some more hands there.
Hello, I'm Neil Shaler from Cambridge, and tonight we've heard a lot about the cost of Brexiting, the loss of identity, the loss of funding, and we're talking about mitigation, how we can hold on to that funding. We haven't heard anything about how. Yes, we should. Now, it seems to me that David Cameron's arrogance backfired. It seems to me that the only way we can mitigate is to make sure it doesn't happen. What can we do to make sure it doesn't happen? We are not yet a referendumocracy.
I'd like to add a positive note here. I was really pleased to hear people talking about vision. Oh, goodness, we need some vision in our politicians. How are we going to develop a vision that is based on the values that we really think are important in this country? How can we develop that from the bottom up so that it is not applied to us, but developed from us?
Very good. And if you can keep coming forward. I think we need to come forward, sorry.
Thank you. My question is about process. We had a referendum and people voted to leave or to remain. But the process affects the very fabric of our nation, and I'm really concerned about that. This referendum was an advisory referendum. The decision, it's been called a decision, and the power of our elected MEPs seems to be taken away from them. So what is happening to the sovereignty of our parliament that seems to be incapable to make a decision now? Does this mean that we will be henceforth ruled by what would be called mob rule, that an advisory referendum is more important than parliament?
My point is on the negotiation process. Now, the three central government departments, which are most externally facing, the Department for Exiting the EU, the Department for International Trade and Foreign, are all led by politicians who campaigned to leave the EU. Now, I don't deny that the Leave side won the referendum, they got the majority of the votes, but the 48% is a very, very large minority. If a parliamentary party got 48% in the general election, they would have a huge mandate to govern, they would have a massive majority in Parliament. So, if there's time for a question, my question to the panel would be how do we make sure that the views of everyone, whether from individuals, businesses, charities, academic institutes, how do we make sure that the views of everyone are taken into account in the negotiation process and it's not just Brexiteers who govern the discussions?
Thank you. And could you bring the microphone right down to the person in front here with the voting registration, please?
We've talked quite a lot about what kind of country we want to be and what kind of country we want to live in. I don't want to live in a country where a leaflet comes through the door that says, as a fact, and repeats it 3 times, that 350 million of your taxes go to Brussels every week, and that is presented under the headline of some facts. Now, you might call that corruption, you might call that politics, but I certainly don't call it the kind of country I want to live in.
I'm really sorry, I'm trying to get as many as possible. We are up against a finish time at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to ask Mike to start, ask each of the panel members to be fairly brief. I will point out in my finishing comments that there will be more opportunities, so there will be other times when we can have this discussion. Mike, if you can pick up some of those points.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Well, I had 15 questions, but I'm not answered 15. Gentlemen made a point about immigration and can we justify immigration or we should be. And I think part of that was what I was saying, for example, governments have underfunded internal nurse training, for example. It's significant underfunding and processes it socially disincentivize people to take it on. I think we've got to address that for the reasons that you said. I mentioned that earlier. I do make a contrast in that to research, because I think research you want to do without boundaries as much as possible. On the lady, in regard to the range of questions she raised about NHS, relative spending, yes, you're right. I did raise a whole number of issues, mental health, increased security, disabled you mentioned, so I think I did run through quite the significant challenges that we face. We are not surprised, I should say, in an increase in over 85 and over 65 presentations. It's the speed at which they've increased has been out with previous trend over the last 18 months. That's the point I'm making. And it's at the margin that you create this huge pressure on the hospital. So it's the increase, it's a complex number of issues, and today we're not about NHS, but we can go through that separately. I haven't seen the stuff around trading in the United States, but that's all premature. This is going to be a long time in the Assembly House. There'll be lots of opportunities to debate that. Gentlemen at the back asked about research. Yes, of course you're always right. We've always had access to international research monies. But the reality is, I think the numbers are right, that actually what the UK has got back from the EU in research funding is far outstripped what it put in for EU research funding. So there's a net deficit there to be addressed. But I do take it one look, it has to be international the way we go about that. There were 2 questions up there, I think on my count numbers 11 and 12. If you were to record one action, and the other is what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen? Actually, it seems to me the point about Brexit is it is enormously complex and interrelated. There isn't one actually, it's a whole stack of things. Of course there are big things about research, economy, staffing, but actually it's a huge range of complex, difficult things. So I don't think there is one thing. And maybe, that then goes back to the question, what makes it doesn't happen? Maybe that sheer complexity, and we'll have to have political debate over the coming months and years. We will have to have political debate, and maybe that itself will begin to change minds.
Thank you. Claire.
Answer the direct question, which was who would you have on the negotiating panel, and I would naturally go for some business-like people with high integrity, intelligent, but emotionally intelligent as well. I would pick somebody like Warren East, who we know from Arm, who's now with Rolls-Royce, and very sensible and would get to a deal of some sort. I'd go hopefully for Andy Williams, if AstraZeneca, who's been a great help in looking at the actions that we've got facing us here. And I'd probably add Barack Obama because I like him.
Thank you very much. Chris.
So, yes, sitting up here on the panel with some of the questions, it's almost as if there's an expectation from the floor that we're on the opposite side. I'm certainly not on the opposite side. I voted to remain. I passionately want to remain. So, in many ways, I'm as exasperated and angry and frustrated as you are. And I'm also struggling to know quite what to do. Who to negotiate? Well, I think we should use experts. I think it's appalling the way that the debate turned away from experts. I think we're at risk of seeing a similar kind of argument going on in the States at the moment. And again, I think we have to be concerned about this. About research funding, I have no doubt we will get research funding from other sources. And I have no doubt some of it will come from new bilateral agreements, some of it will come from exploring areas we haven't done before. What we will not get, though, is we will not get back to the table with the committees, with the scientists, with the labs, with the communities working on the European projects, because we have to be within those funding mechanisms to be part of those mechanisms. So there is, getting money back is one thing, but the relationships are far more important than the money, and those are what's at risk. One thing to do, I don't know, for me the thing that underpins it all is freedom of movement. And so I think if we can essentially get the government to understand that we've already heard that immigration was used and abused as a term in leading up to the referendum. I think now what we're hearing from actually both sides of the table now that they didn't mean what they really said. And I think we have to re-educate the government that immigration or freedom of movement isn't the fear that we were led to believe it was going into the referendum. I think if we can make progress on that, then other things will flow from that. Without it, I think we're in trouble.
Thank you very much. And Simon, you started, and you finished.
Okay, what do? You fight. Democracy is about participation. If people don't take part in a democratic system, the system doesn't work. That means you, means us, that whatever we think is important to fight for, the values that we hold central to our society, to our community, we have to fight for. Now, partly that's about trying to influence our elected members of Parliament and our other officials. But it's also about acting ourselves. It's about challenging racism when we see it in the streets. It's about fighting every fight that we can. Now, that's hard, and that's slow, and it's painful. But I remind you of a group of people who, for the last 25 years, have fought a very lonely battle, who got defeated time and time again, and yet who, 6 weeks ago, managed to secure victory in a referendum. Now, you might not like that, in fact I know you don't like that, but that those people, those Eurosceptics, who mobilised the arguments, who mobilised the people, who mobilised the very referendum itself, stuck at it. Now, if they can stick at it, you can stick at it. And if you think that change is impossible, if you think that things are bad, that's not a reason to stop, it's a reason to carry on. That our system is in constant dialogue, it's in constant change. And to just come back and finish on the question of who should be negotiating for us, that's not the central question. The question is, what should they negotiate for us? And again, that requires us to act. If we don't tell people what we want, then people will tell us what we want. So, you need to take responsibility, you all need to take responsibility, because that's the only way that we make this thing work and that we find something that we can all live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for saying pretty much exactly what I was going to say, because many of the questions, in fact, that you've had tonight and the points you made have really been aimed at the politicians, and I've been trying to chair it in a non-partisan way. I am highly partisan on this issue, and I can assure you, as I told the rally in the marketplace a few weeks ago, that just because we lost on one occasion, by my reckoning, UKIP have fought about 6,300 elections and lost 6,228 so far. And I think there's a real question around the role of Parliament and who makes the decisions. And that's going to be a battle that's going to be fought out over the next few months. But this is not a process that is coming to an end. On that note, I've had hundreds and hundreds of submissions from people in Cambridge, often very detailed on these issues. And I'm going to be convening a series of meetings around the city starting in September, where we go into more detail on particular issues. I'd invite you, if you're interested, to write to me in the meantime or to take part in those discussions. Because this is not the end of the story, and I think something we haven't touched on tonight is our decision inevitably has an effect on other European countries too. I have to say that political weather in other parts of Europe doesn't look great in the next year or two, so we blithely say, would we like to stay? Well, we're going to ask the other people whether they want us to stay, frankly, the way we've carried on. It's going to be different in future. But I am an eternal optimist in politics, and I do believe that if we have a sensible discussion with the British people, explain these points, many of which were not clear to everybody, then we can come to a new arrangement, a new understanding with European countries. Because, frankly, there's discontent and unhappiness right across Europe. It's foolish not to notice that fact. So I hope you all feel as energised as I do by the discussion tonight. I'd like to particularly thank the City Council for hosting it. I think it's an important act of civic leadership. And I'd like to thank all the panel for giving their time and for you for coming tonight. And perhaps you can show your appreciation of the panel